Welcome to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast, hosted by the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association. We provide you with up-to-date information on health topics geared towards the Orthodox Jewish community. This podcast content is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice or as a substitute for the medical advice of a physician.
Welcome to the Jewish Orthodox Women's Medical Association podcast. I am your host, Elisa Minkin. I'm a general pediatrician and proud JOMA member. And today I'm really honored and really excited to be interviewing Tzivy Reiter and Raizy Keilson from Ohel. Before I introduce them, please, if there is a topic you want to hear, if you want to be interviewed, if you know someone you want to be interviewed, if you have comments about episodes we've done already, please reach out to us at health@joma.org, HEALTH@joma.org. We want to hear from you. Tzivy Reiter is the director of Children's and National Trauma Services, Ohel. She currently directs Outpatient Mental Health Services for adults and children, school-based services for youth, early childhood mental health and trauma services. In that capacity, Tzivy has overseen the implementation of evidence-based practice models across programs, utilizing current research and data-driven processes to produce meaningful outcomes. She is a specialist in trauma and disaster mental health, having run crisis counseling programs after 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy. She has intervened on local and national traumas, including the Houston floods, the Pittsburgh shootings, and the Woolsey, California fires. She has led the Ohel mental health response to COVID, including the pivot to telemental health treatment and virtual psychoeducational sessions that attracted tens of thousands of participants throughout the pandemic. She co-created a resilience workbook that was used by 10,000 children during the pandemic and was named a mental health hero during COVID by New York City Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health. Ms. Reiter facilitated the development of trauma-informed school-based resources, including Return to School COVID Toolkit and a trauma-sensitive schools model, Resilient Schools. Most recently, Ms. Reiter co-authored a book for preschool children, I Feel That Way, and That's Okay, also co-written by Naomi Baum, PhD, and an accompanying teacher's guide. Raizy Keilson is a licensed clinical social worker. She has been working with young children for 15 years, first as a therapist and now as both a therapist and a clinical supervisor of all treatments at the Early Childhood Mental Health Program at Ohel. Raizy treats early childhood, PTSD, postpartum reactions, childhood anxiety, parent-child relationship challenges, and divorce reactions. Raizy was trained in multiple modalities, including child-parent psychotherapy, CPP, SPACE, which we talk about in this interview, interpersonal psychotherapy, IPT, Triple P. Raizy collaborated on the development of the book, I Feel That Way, and That's Okay, and other resilience workbooks developed by Ohel. Raizy is a proud mother of 5 children and loves to read, especially good children's books. She can often be found combining her love of reading with mothering. Hi, Tzivy. Hi, Raizy. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for having us. We're so happy to be here.
I'm really honored and I'm really excited. I always say that, and I actually always mean it. That's like my intro. It's my standard intro, but I really mean it because I only have guests that I'm excited about interviewing by definition. And you're here to talk about resilience, which is absolutely so foundational. It is so important. And so I really want to dive into different aspects of resilience. You guys have written a book. Actually, you co-wrote this book. I Feel That Way, and That's Okay. I have it, okay? Because I bought it because I thought it was so important. The minute it came out, I bought it, and I think it's great. So I want to start with that book because that's new. That came out recently. I'd love to hear what led to the writing of this book and what ages it's most appropriate for.
Sure. So I guess I'll start off, and Raizy could add to it. So we do a lot of work in the resilience space, here at Ohel. And actually during COVID, we created a COVID-19 resilience workbook that was actually used by almost 10,000 children during the pandemic. And we also do a tremendous amount of work in the early childhood space, right? We work a lot with kids like 0 to 5 and their parents. It's actually impossible to work with kids 0 to 5 and not work very closely together with their parents. All of our work is very much through like an attachment lens. And we really believe in the power of that like early intervention in those early years and how much really power that you have to set the kids on really a trajectory for positive mental health and just building skills that will help them for really their entire lives. So we work so much in that space, and we had so many people ask us, preschools and just different, organizations that we work with, what are you doing for the little ones? Like, this is a workbook, workbook, it was for kids, 5, 6 to 10 or 11. A workbook is not developmentally appropriate, right, for the little ones. So we brainstorm. We have a wonderful team, a wonderful early childhood team, and Raizel's the supervisor of that team. And we kind of brainstorm, okay, what are we going to do for the little ones? And what are we going to create that will help build resilience in these kids and their caregivers? And we couldn't decide between a coloring book or a storybook. Okay, both, developmentally appropriate. And so we actually, in the end, settled on both. We created the storybook, but there actually are free supplementary coloring pages on our website.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah. So kind of everyone can get, parents and teachers can get the best of both worlds. But that was really what happened. It really kind of was born from just this need to be able to do something also for this population, something meaningful, but it was also developmentally appropriate. So that was kind of the idea was born. And then really we worked on it, I would say, really collaboratively. It was very much based on the principles of the work that we do in our early childhood, like mental health program, our understanding of attachment, and social emotional learning, right? We really believe that social emotional learning is a greater predictor, and those skills, it's a greater predictor of academic success than even IQ for kids. So it's just a mission that we really believe in, that we really wanted to further. And I'll let Raizel add to that, because I'm sure she also has a lot to say.
It was a really exciting project, because we were thinking, okay, we're going to do a book, but how is our book going to be different? And I really think I challenge people actually to find something that can meet this piece. And what we did is we said, there's a lot of books. Some are feeling books. We have tons of books. And I'm in one of our treatment rooms. We have tons of books. Some are written from a therapeutic standpoint. Some are not. They talk about feelings. They talk about experiences. But we felt like what is missing was that first step, which is, well, how do you know how you feel? And that's the introspection, which I hope we're going to talk more about. But our conversation starts before the feeling is aware. And when we explain introspection, I think you'll have an idea. But
I'm
I
gonna
really
have you
feel
say
like
it slowly, because it's a long word.
Introspection. So should I talk a little bit about
Yes,
that?
please.
What I think is really unique about our book is that we ask the question, how do you know how you feel? See, you don't start out with feeling awareness, right? You're not like, oh, I'm sad. And really that leads into introspection, which is one of the 8 senses, and it is not exclusively about feelings. It's actually, and I'm sure as a pediatrician, you deal with toilet training and food issues, and all those things are also related to introspection. Introspection is the ability to be aware of the sensations within your body. Right? So that's teaching a child being aware they need the bathroom, but they can also be about being aware of what my body is feeling. And that's a first step. So really what I think our book does, which is unique, is we talk about that first step. We talk about helping children be aware of how they feel. And what is really important is we're not teaching introspection. Actually, if a child seems to lack awareness of what's going on in their body, we typically think might be a sign of maybe a child struggling with spectrum, like a spectrum child, or
sensory integration, which doesn't have to just be spectrum to be
that one. And we also see it in trauma. So children who've experienced interpersonal trauma don't necessarily, because it was adapted to ignore what was going on inside their body, they've learned to use this globally and are not paying attention. But really, from the time you're born, you're very aware of your internal experiences, right? And that's, I'm hungry, so I start to cry. And so that was really where we want to start the conversation with, these are feelings, but before we say, this is happy, this is sad, these are the labels, this is what makes you feel, we want to say, well, how do you know? How do you know how you feel? And we tried to think, and this was really very fun and collaborative, like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And in the book, it's pretty broad. So we're not saying to a child, all of these you need to feel, and then you know you're feeling this. We're saying, no, think about these sort of sensations. Maybe you have some of them, and that's how we know that you're feeling happy, sad. So that's why we're really excited. It's like a new way of talking about feeling recognition. And the reason this is really related to resilience is because we think, being able to be seen for your experiences and being able to express your feelings, and being able to understand how the world is impacting your internal system. Well, that's the foundation, right? Of being able to manage when something big comes your way, a big or a little big, right? The normal bigs that happen. But if you know I can manage and I can regulate, or my caregivers can handle me and they can help me regulate, well, then you can bounce back from whatever that big thing is that happens. And that's resilience, right? The ability to bounce back from something that happens that sort of sets you off or shifts.
Yeah, this is incredible because there's so many books for kids on regular sensory type things, particularly the basic senses.
Mhm.
Not on interoception, right?
Yeah. If I can actually add to this, because we really want, firstly, because we do so much work in the space, we know a lot of the books that are out there. We know the tools that exist, and we really wanted to create something that added value. That wasn't going to be like just another book about emotions. We wanted something that really would be different and in a very practical way would help sort of teach these skills, which is also why we created some of those supplementary tools. That's not even just a book. It's almost like an experience, you know. Believe it or not, we've actually gotten a request from many of the preschools we're in to create teddy bears or puppets with the characters of the book, and we're actually doing that. It's almost going to be like a curriculum that you can really use to kind of really integrate those concepts with the kids. But that was like really important to us, to do something that really added value, that was different, that was like a contribution to the field. And a lot of time and attention was put into those details of like, what are we putting in this book? What is the message we want to communicate? Kind of like Raizy said, there's no shoulds, right? There's no shoulds when it comes to emotions, right? It's just, you know, everybody's different, and you feel that way, and that's okay. And everybody feels differently, and that's okay. That's literally the refrain of the book. And even just in terms of being developmentally appropriate, you know, this cute little repetitive refrain that will appeal to the little ones, you know, and that was kind of the thinking behind it. So
right, and it's a mantra that the parent can take with them later and use,
exactly.
because of course this is not just about reading a book one time or even many times. It's about bringing it into life.
Yeah, and also just even the whole model for the book is, you know, the caregiver figure, the teddy, you know, kind of accompanies and companions the Teddy and Teddy's, you know, friends kind of on this journey through learning about emotions. And it's kind of that ever-present companion, you know, kind of with them, co-regulating with them, communicating to them, and sort of like modeling this attachment that we're really looking and we're trying to kind of reinforce sort of in parents and children, because that is really the core of all of our work. It's very much through an attachment lens.
Right. So you keep using the word attachment and co-regulation. We really need to go deeper into that, define them, and talk about that.
Sure.
Please, one of you. I don't know which one.
Of course. Well, we all have a lot to say about it, but attachment is very much.
It's important because not everybody will listen and understand that.
Course.
And it's also important to understand all the issues that come with helping your child deal with these feelings, right?
Right. So attachment is very much at the core of all of our work. And it's not just about preschoolers. Like, we really believe that, you know, you can work on an attachment, you can repair an attachment really at any age. Like, it's very much, I think, the lens that we look at almost all of our work, our trauma work, our work with teens, our work with even adults. And a lot of our work actually that we even do with preschoolers, even in the mental health space, is like attachment based. Like, we're treating not the parent, not the child, but the attachment, the relationship between them. But if there are ways that we can build resilience and kind of help, you know, build a trusting, secure attachment, right, between the parent and the caregiver and the child at the early ages, again, you're setting up that child for a positive trajectory for their whole life, and you're going to help them build resilience. So part of what attachment means is basically a foundation of safety, security, and trust that's established, right, between a caregiver and a child. So you might have heard the expression of serve and return, right? That a child expresses a need, and then that need is seen, heard, right, and addressed, right? So they're honored, that need is honored, and if they express a feeling, that feeling is heard and seen and witnessed, and they're not shamed, right, for expressing that need, and that need is not dismissed. That would be the foundation of a healthy and sort of secure attachment. The caregiver is present and emotionally attuned. This does not mean the caregiver is perfect. That doesn't mean the caregiver always gets it right by any means, right? Because you can always repair. You can always, you know, there's always a way to, you know, sort of acknowledge and repair. We always want to help parents feel sort of not helpless, right, but like, it's okay, you know, it's okay. We make mistakes, and that's how we learn, and that's how our kids learn. But
right. I mean, to repeat it, that's such an important point. I want to underscore it, that when we make mistakes, we can model that repair. We can model that resilience.
Yes.
Because we will make mistakes. I don't like it when parents hear this and they feel like they have to be the perfect parent.
No.
And so I want to underscore that.
And well, I mean, the famous, I think, John Bowlby, right? A good enough mother is good enough. And I think what I do in my work is I say, actually, misattunement. So the moment when you missed something that was really important to your child, or you couldn't regulate. And I want to talk more about what that looks like, co-regulating. But
Yes,
the
co-regulation.
moment you don't get it right,
Mhm.
and you don't feel like you got it right, and you don't feel attached, that misattunement offers an opportunity called repairing. So it's not that, oh, you don't get it 100%, you got a 70. It's that, no, you need to get 70s because you need to have moments where you can repair. And actually, with our most intimate relationships, we should have moments of repair, because repair creates intimacy. It means, oh, I see I didn't get it right, but you're so important. I'm going to get it right next time. And the people who we're not close with, we don't need to have repairs. We don't have misattunements. And if we do have misattunements, we go on our way because we're like, I'm not going to see them again, or they're not super important. It's the most important people that we will have misattunements. But the key, and this is where the healthy development happens, right, is that I wasn't seen for a child, right? Or I wasn't understood, or my need wasn't important. And I feel really not good about it. But then I have the repair is that moment when they say, no, I did it wrong. And it's okay. It's human, right? All of those messaging that you're going to give to a child when you have misattunement and repair are so foundational to healthy relationships throughout the lifespan. So we're not saying, oh, mommies, don't worry if you don't get 100. It's hard to get 100s. We're saying, of course you don't get 100s because you're close with this child. You're with them all the time. You will get it wrong. And that's not a problem.
Right. And we also tell parents, because we hear from parents sometimes like, oh, my child did X, Y, and Z, and my child was very upset. And I basically said, instead of like honoring their sadness, I said, oh, don't cry, or, I rescued them, or I probably, whatever I did that I shouldn't have done. And like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And we always say, it's okay. The bus will come around again. Like we really believe, like, it's okay. You'll have plenty of opportunities, and that's all part of the process.
Right. I want to talk for just a minute, because as a pediatrician, I see parents drowning under the pressure of parenting today, which has become a verb, right? I mean, the expectations are sky high, and the danger that I see to focusing on attachment, which of course is important, is raising the bar too high and having parents, really struggling with trying to reach what they think is that correct type of parenting. So I want to talk just for a few minutes about how we're not saying that every second of the day your job is to constantly work on this. Does that make sense? We're human, we're busy, we may not.
I think are you referring to the feeling that parents feel like they have to protect and validate or help a child navigate every experience?
Well, yes, I am, because I'm thinking about there was a pediatrician, Sears, and he had these books on attachment parenting, and there's this idea that you should parent through the night. Even when you're sleeping, your child should sleep with you. Safe sleeping pediatrics, we don't recommend that, but anyway.
So we don't mean attachment like maybe whatever attachment.
I want to clarify this,
theory
because I don't
that
want
has been
this.
it's been adapted by
Right.
A lot of evidence-based interventions use the word attachment. So attachment is not like copyrighted, but what we mean is the general theory and of that as humans, we understand the world interpersonally. So when and it's particularly important in the 0 to 5, although I will definitely explain it is important throughout the lifespan, but it's particularly important in 0 to 5 because children don't understand how to understand the world. They come in and they're like, what is this place? And the way they are primed to understand the world is through their caregiver. And they are looking at the caregiver to say, when do I need to be afraid? Can my needs be met? Am I important enough for my needs to be met? And all this begins to develop the foundation of self and the expectations of the world, the expectation of other humans. So when we mean attachment, that's what we're talking really about, that experiencing the world through interpersonal relationships. And because little children have so many needs, the littler they get, the more needs they need help being met. They are primarily in the care of caregivers, right? And particularly a mother and a father. Those relations are really impactful. But this is something we navigate throughout the lifespan, right? We're constantly learning about new relationships. Well, when you go to school, you're learning about social relationships. When you're in your teenage years, you're learning about individuation and defining yourself amongst your peers. And certainly marriage creates its own interpersonal. So it's really, attachment is not just about like always meeting someone's needs, but attachment is about being tethered to other people in the world for you to understand it and to navigate it. Does that make sense? And that's what we're talking about.
Right,
not-
it does. I just want to underscore again that this is not the parent's job to navigate for their child and smooth all the bumps out, because that's their job to
No.
create this attachment. I want to just
Right.
underscore that because it's misinterpreted, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I actually just want to kind of add to what you're saying, because I think it's a really important point. Like, I personally do a lot of work with working parents, and I feel like it's so important to just sort of support and not shame parents and not create these like unrealistic sort of expectations. So building resilience is really very much a parallel process. You know, you build resilience in yourself as a parent, and then by doing that, you model building resilience in your children. Part of building resilience is self-compassion. Part of building resilience is taking care of your own needs. Like, it's not about sacrificing your needs at the altar of your children by any means. And part of, I think, you know, teaching resilience to your children is modeling that your needs count. Your needs come, you know, are very important. You're allowed to meet your own needs. You don't have to be that sort of stereotypical, self-sacrificing, you know, altruistic mother as a matter, or father. As a matter of fact, when you meet your own needs, you're so much better positioned to support your child, right? So that's, I think, like very, very important to kind of give that over to parents, because I think you're right. Sometimes the messaging they get is you have to smooth every bump for your child. You have to make sure your kids are okay. Well, actually, that is not the way that you build resilience. The way that you build resilience is to let your child experience discomfort, to let your child experience challenges. Don't rescue them from those experiences. Don't problem solve for them. Don't smooth every bump or prevent bumps from happening, but accompany them, companion them, be there with them, honor them, you know, witness what is happening for them, but don't fix it for them. That's not your job. Like, paradoxically, that actually helps children build resilience.
But it's so hard. I love what everything both of you are saying, and thank you for expanding on it, exactly the direction I wanted you to go in. It's so hard because precisely we feel like our job as mothers, fathers is to fix things, and to sit with them in that discomfort can feel insurmountable, right? At times.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they have to get our book. Because the other piece of the book is the introspection, but the other piece is the co-regulation, which is, so my child is experiencing what we use when we work with little kids is big feelings, and big can be the good stuff too. Just by the way, you can feel really excited and also feel dysregulated, but let's talk about the ones that are harder, right? You have to bring your kids to get a shot, or you have to drop them off at preschool, and it would be inappropriate for you to spend the whole year in nursery, right? So these are things that your child has to then experience that discomfort. And in the book, we really talk about the co-regulating, not problem solving. And exactly what Tzivy's sort of highlighting, that when you jump always into problem solving, the child gets two messages. One is that I can't manage, right? You're setting up you don't think they can handle it, right? And also you're setting up the message that, like, if I'm not there to protect and whatever, you will not be okay, right? So you can't manage and you really need me. And that is absolutely not healthy. So we do want appropriately for children to encounter discomfort. And the book really talks about things like witnessing and acknowledging it. And people often feel like, but that's not enough, but it is. It is. You don't have to solve it. Here's the piece where I'll get parents be like, well, I validated it, or I was present, but it didn't go away. I'm not looking to rush people through an experience, right? Your child's upset about something. In the book, the teddy bear loses a balloon that he has, right? So they're pouting, and the mother bear responds with acknowledging, I can see how you feel. She's getting down on his level. She's paying attention. He doesn't snap out of it. That's the piece. Parents are like, but then they're still upset. It's okay to be upset. Why do we have to rush them? But what you want to see is the child eventually, right, sort of like peak in their upsetness and then slowly return. But the idea that if I validate, you should immediately be better. What? Do you want people to do that to you as an adult, right? Immediately say, I see you're upset and you should snap out of it and be fine. It's okay to feel discomfort. It's okay for it not to pass within 5 seconds.
Right. And you could just buy them a new balloon.
And that, right. And what message would that be?
Right.
Right.
I'm here to fix it, that you can't tolerate discomfort. But I want to go a little deeper into how to help the parents tolerate the discomfort of their children's feelings. Because that's where the challenge lies, right?
Right. No, 100%. I mean, that's really the whole idea about co-regulation. It's besides that, yes, you're regulating with the child rather than expecting them to regulate for themselves. But part of it is the parent is regulating themselves, and through regulating themselves, they're really modeling for that child through kind of wordless observation how to be regulated. So think about a kid who's having a temper tantrum in a store, right? And then the kid is getting very, very dysregulated, and and is making a scene, and then the parent is there, right? And the parent is probably thinking a lot of automatic thoughts right inside her head. She's thinking like, oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. Like, what are people going to think about me? Or maybe she's thinking this is my fault because I didn't feed him before we came, whatever they're thinking, right? Whatever automatic thoughts. And then the parent is starting to get really dysregulated themselves because the whole situation is embarrassing. They're very agitated. And then what happens is the situation just ends up sort of, getting worse. The child is sort of picking up on the parents, dysregulation, and they're getting increasingly dysregulated. So if the parent can sort of practice that idea of like self-compassion, or almost like talking themselves through it, like, it's okay. Kids will tantrum. This is what happens sometimes. This is normal. And sort of they can sort of regulate themselves and sort of calmly, navigate whatever is happening, maybe not give in to the child, because that's also something that ends up happening. You just want to like stop that child from screaming and crying. So I'm just going to kind of give them what they want, sort of like, that's not necessarily our job to give in to our kids. Although if we do, it's okay. Sometimes, again, like Raizy said, we can always repair, we can always learn from it, but almost like talk themselves sort of through it and say, it's okay. Kids are going to tantrum. Kids are going to, my kid is going to be sad. My kid is going to be upset. I don't need to rescue them through this. I'm going to try to maybe the parent will not get through her whole shopping list and quickly try to, kind of get through and, leave the store and kind of get herself out of that situation. Maybe she can, take a breath herself, right? And just do different things to kind of regulate herself and kind of get through the different situation. But that probably will help make a difference from the tantrum, escalating. It's not going to fix it. It's not going to stop it. It's not a magic pill, but it will sort of help at least contain the situation, a little bit. And I think part of it is the messages that we give ourselves as parents, the expectations. Kids are going to tantrum. This is what happens. Things aren't always going to be perfect. I'm going to be in a rush. I'm not going to be able to make sure my kid is well fed and well rested every time I have an outing. And just, again, that self-compassion. And I think just managing, those expectations around what it means to parent. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean our kids are always going to be happy, and content. And we don't have to rescue them. And that's really, I think, if parents listening remember one thing from this like whole discussion, it would sort of be that, like, it is okay for your kids to be sad. It's okay for your kids to be upset. It's okay for your kids to be angry. It's not your responsibility to make sure that they're always feeling happy and content.
Right. And don't confuse the greater sensitivity to your child's feelings as thinking that means you have to make them happy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it can be very confusing, to be that more, you want to be that more sensitive parent. You want to be attuned, right? So I really want to explain the term co-regulation and go into it more.
I want to really highlight the co-regulation. Part of it is definitely modeling, but I really want you to understand that it's like an internal, natural system. I don't want parents to feel like, oh, do I have this skill? Do I not have this skill? Children are primed to pick up on our internal state. It's actually like protective for them, right? They need to pay attention to what we're experiencing. So for example, if and you could see this with like a 9-month-old, right? A stranger comes in and they get themselves into the baby's face, and you see the baby kind of like glances at mommy, like, is this okay? And if mommy's reaction without words, she's not explaining this is just a really fast system that happens, and she kind of smiles, or she's like, yeah, the child then is like, oh, this is fine, and will then maybe pay attention to the stranger. So we have an internal system from the time we're born that are very aware of our caregiver state. So that's what I want to bring us back to co-regulation. When you do not need to solve it, you do not need to prevent your child from having a negative experience. The only thing they need from you is for you to see them, acknowledge them, but also be in a state that says, I can handle you when you're dysregulated, right? You're internally calm. They they're not looking at you and saying, oh, I want to be like mommy. They match you because that's how their system is created. So when a child, just to give like, what would this kind of look like, right? So the child's dysregulated again in the supermarket, and you recognize this happens, last week it was someone else's kid, this week it's your kid, and you're not super dysregulated. Your heart rate is not very fast. I'm slowing down purposely, like your talking is not loud and fast. You're regulated. The child internally experiences that. They recognize that, and they can match you and bring their own breathing down. And it's not about you saying, breathe with me. Sometimes it is. Some families, that is something they do, but it's just you being that way. And this is true with a shot in the doctor's office, right? If mommy is thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to hurt so much, and she's tense and her body's tense, and the baby doesn't even speak words, right? But he senses mommy shift into fear. The baby will become dysregulated. She doesn't need to say anything. But if mommy thinks this will be very quick, this is something that's going to keep you safe. I don't love it, but I'm okay. I can handle this. That messaging without words will come through. So I just really want parents to know this is an internal system you have. You've got this. You don't need to learn fancy skills. What I want you to do is pay attention to it. I want you to believe that you are enough.
Right, but what if you feel like you're not enough? I'm pushing back. I'm pushing back because I'm listening to this, and it's so much easier said than done. I'm thinking of two scenarios. One scenario is children vary in temperament. So you have the kid who just sits there and cry and laughs with their shot. I have those kids, no matter what the parent does, right? It's an easy temperament. And then you have the kids who are much more challenging in temperament. They're screaming when they're like a block away from the doctor's office, for example. They're already so dysregulated. And asking the parent to, be extra regulated to co-regulate that child is asking more than for the easy temperament child. And another really important situation is when the parent themselves is struggling with their own emotional regulation.
Yeah. Should I grab that?
Yeah, sure.
This is something. So let's talk about temperaments. First of all, children are their own, right? They're not like little mini us, which is sometimes a problem when parents just see them as an extension. And you might have a child who is more dysregulated, more sensitive than you are. And it's sometimes hard to understand that. Our job is not to make sure they become like us and always be, if I'm regulated, therefore they should be regulated. Our job is to be able to be present. And yes, there are children who, no matter how calm and present and prepared you're going to be for shots, they will get dysregulated. But when our focus is on how I can control my child's body and my child's reaction, we will get dysregulated because we cannot do that.
Right.
We will become frustrated because we do not have that control. So here's where I would shift with a parent whose child just hates the doctor or the dentist experience. Definitely, you would want to be proactive in the sense of preparing, right? This is what to expect. We actually, sometimes it can get so bad that you can't get to the doctor's office or the dentist, and that they can even benefit from treatment, some exposure work, preparing, working through. But let's say it's not that intense. So you definitely want to be proactive, and you internally are proactive. I know this child's going to be hard. I am not going to bring my 4 other kids with this child. So definitely proactive is super important. And then letting go of, and therefore, because I did all these things and I'm regulated, therefore you, child, should have this response. The more we let go of the idea that we have full control of our children's internal experience, the less we're going to be in power struggles and fighting and sort of like shifting into this radical acceptance. This is hard. God, I wish this kid was a little easier at the doctor's office. It's okay to have that. And I know she probably will not be, and this is going to be long, and I'm probably going to need an Advil after I leave because I'm going to have such a headache. Then you will be in a more regulated state because you're expecting it to be difficult. You know what your job is. Regulate myself, certainly set boundaries, right? It would not be healthy for a parent who says, this is so uncomfortable, I'm never going to go to the doctor, right? That's would be unhealthy. That's kind of what it would look like as far as a dysregulated child who's not matching exactly your experience. Now let's talk for a minute, because this is super important, the parent. It's important for you to know your triggers. And here's the thing about triggers, we don't always realize we're going to have them until after they happen. So sometimes this is not before, it's after. We're like, why was I so irritated when I found out my child stole something, right? They took something from school. I wouldn't even call the word steal, but let's say that's your experience. And you just, oh my gosh, you're going to be up. And you slow down, you maybe realize, you know what? I have a family member that actually stole, and I get super triggered that I don't want my children to ever have that experience, but you're forgetting, right? So my reaction, I am triggered to react to an event disproportionately, right? I might overreact to that child stealing. And I'm dysregulated. And so sometimes we don't know till after, and that can be just take some reflection, be like, what are my triggers? Why was my reaction so over the top? And I think the first step is identifying what is going on for me internally. And that's what I would recommend a parent who finds that, like, I don't get regulated. Well, is it in certain things? Some people find chutzpah really, really dysregulating. Slow down, not in the moment. You do not have access to reflection. When you're triggered, after, reflect maybe that evening. Why was like that really set me off? And I acted in a way that like, I do not think was helpful. What's going on? And maybe you can sit with someone that you trust and feel close with to just kind of like flush it out. But that would really be my advice to someone who finds themselves particularly dysregulated with a reoccurring issue. And then I want to say, parents get dysregulated and we can't always regulate our kids. Take space. I talk about mommy timeouts. Sometimes you're with a child who, and it can be for like 100 reasons. Sometimes you can't trigger it. You're up last night with a kid who was throwing up, and now you're trying to make supper, and this one is saying they can't study for the test unless you sit down and actually pay attention. And you're like, and then your 2-year-old starts having a tantrum. And that probably if you just got on the floor for 5 seconds and like hugged her and said, it's going to be okay, she would go back. But you have no space left within you to be present like that. You know what? That's okay. It's okay. It's okay to not be regulated. And the best thing is not to push yourself into a situation where you feel like you can't manage, but rather take space, regroup. That can be really not like take space, like heading out and going somewhere. It can literally be like going into the bathroom, taking 5 deep breaths, picturing that, oh, no, okay, soon my older daughter's going to come home or my husband, and they're going to help me, whatever it is that reframes and then rejoin. You can be triggered as a parent. It's okay.
I love that. I love that you're talking about compassion for the parent, right? And I think that we have to, also emphasize how important it is for you to be aware of what your needs are.
Yeah.
That takes self-awareness, right, on the parent's part.
Yeah, no, it really does. I always say self-awareness is really your best friend. Like, it really is a tool. It's a tremendously important, parenting tool, really. Like, are my buttons being pushed? Like, what's going on for me that this is like so upsetting me that I'm having this outsized reaction? Like, what is happening for me? Kind of like be curious about yourself, and be curious about your child too, because every behavior really is a communication. I feel that it does really help to reframe, like when your kid is just giving you such a hard time, you just can't make them do what you want them to do, what you need them to do, right? To kind of take a step back and say, my child is not necessarily giving me a hard time. My child is having a hard time. What is going on?
Oh, I love that.
And I think that just, and it's hard to do it in the moment, and like Raizy said, and you may not be able to do it in the moment. Maybe you'll do it afterwards. Maybe you'll say, what was going on for my child that this was so difficult for them? And I also think it's about managing your expectations and planning and preparing, because it's like taking your kid to the doctor is so difficult and stressful. Right? Maybe you need to bring an iPad. Maybe you just need to stick an iPad in their hand and just get through it, and that's okay. Or maybe you need to have a partner, or your spouse come with you, or go instead of you. Maybe, whatever it is that you need to do to get through, that's okay. Like, we don't have to put these expectations on themselves. Remember, there was one parent who, worked a very long day and came home and just was like the thing that just really was so hard for them after a long day of work was like doing homework with their kids, right? And one particular child, it was like they're always getting into battles. But so what this parent finally, after time and reflection and support, gave herself permission to do, hire a homework helper. You know what? I am just delegating this one thing that brings me so much tension, because what happened? The parent felt like, I should be doing homework with my child. I should be on top of what's going on with their schoolwork. I should not be outsourcing this. But what ended up happening is the relationship was really impacted by this power struggle, by the negativity that surrounded this experience of doing the homework together, instead of the time together after work being filled with sort of joyful moments or moments of connection, right? Moments of compassion. It was really all about this this power struggle over the homework. And once that was delegated and the parents sort of gave themselves permission to delegate it, they were able to have more moments of connection and more moments of joy, like in their parenting and with that child, which really makes all the difference.
I love that. I'm going to repeat your line because I love it so much. I'm going to repeat it slowly. My child is not giving me a hard time. My child is having a hard
Firstly, I'm not
time.
the original author of it. It's just something I've heard. I don't know who the source is, but it's like something that I've heard and like really resonated. I use it a lot in trainings and just kind of, it's very much part of a trauma-informed approach. When you look at
Right.
someone who's like, again, having an outside reaction. So when you use your trauma-informed lens, instead of saying, what's wrong with you? Instead, you think, what happened to you? What happened to you that you're acting in this way? So it's very much like consistent with that sort of using that lens to kind of look at behaviors and people, right, and reactions with that sort of approach of like what's going on for them.
Right. And Raizy, you mentioned earlier how it can be hard to have a child that's so much more sensitive, than you. But it's also hard, you being sensitive and having a child just like you.
Yeah.
Okay. I see that a lot as a pediatrician.
Yeah, anxiety can run in a family,
Mm-hmm.
and you can definitely have where they can feed off each other. And that's why it's really important to understand that if your anxiety is taking over, it's not like a healthy understanding of the world, right? So what you'll have is, right, the child says, "This is so scary," and the mother says, "I know," and that, right, and then you can imagine this escalation. I've certainly experienced in the therapy room, and I've heard examples where they'll feed off each other. And the key to that is we're not going to make anxious children with anxious mommies not anxious. What we're going to want to try to do is help them sort of not have the anxiety so internal as like a correct understanding of the environment, but to recognize, oh, this is my, like externally recognize, oh, this is my anxiety speaking. Like I am thinking that this is not manageable, but that's my anxiety. So we kind of create like distance between this internal state of anxiety as like, this is how things are, let it navigate your decisions. We try to put some distance, but yes, these things can be genetic and we can feed off each other. And there can be great strength in being able to understand each other and experience the world similarly. It helps a child feel understood and seen. There's many reasons why it's good to biologically be similar, but it can also, it's
a double-edged sword, because you can understand your child, you could be more empathic, but you can also have trouble, right, with over-identification, right, and amplifying the child's anxiety. And in fact, I interviewed a psychologist, Dr. Michelle Conzi, and she does not treat children with anxiety without treating the whole family or the parents.
Yeah.
They have to have family counseling as well. And so I want to put a plug here for parents in terms of both family counseling and individual counseling for yourself if you need it.
Mm-hmm.
We see parents, when I have parents, I do not say this as like to be nice. You are the expert on your child. Why wouldn't I work with the expert on the child if I want to help the child? I invite you to the room, not because I judge you and think I know better. And actually, that's a horrible stance to think that I'm the expert in that way. I invite you to the room because you have expertise. I have expertise. I know that in the mental health, but you have expertise on your child, what will work in your system. So that's why, I think parents are super important. I do not want to replace a parent. I do not want to be a better parent in the therapy room. I want to be a partner. And I asked myself, and this is sort of leaning to what Tzivy's talking about as far as behavior, when I see a behavior, whether it's in a caregiver or a child, I just say, why? Why? And that curiosity, why is this behavior helping you? Or why do you feel the need to do that, as opposed to, let's get the skills so you stop this? Because when we miss that why, which by the way, we don't always get with kids because they're not able to reflect, but we hypothesize. So like knowing things about them, why does this behavior, although very problematic, seem to be helping them, before we jump into, and this is what you should do instead. And I hope I offer that kindness also to parents, and parents should offer it to themselves and to their spouses, that sort of kindness of like, you make sense, your behavior, although maybe not helpful, and maybe you wish you didn't have it, but there's a part of it that makes sense. Let's be curious about it. Let's understand it, because that will be the best way to address how to get new behavior or other problem-solving ways.
Right. Are you talking about the parent's response to the child or the child's response? Because I was talking a few minutes ago about trying to help the parent with their reaction.
I think both reactions.
Okay.
I'm curious, but what I want to let parents know is that they can trust their experience of their child. Yes, there's room for professional help, but when you're in an environment where you're seeking out professional help, you should still recognize your expertise of your child. You've lived with them. You know them, sometimes before they were born, right? You carry them. And that's a really important piece that I want parents to walk away feeling empowered. You are important. You have room, even if things get to the point where maybe you do need more support, recognize that you're still part of the solution.
I love this. I love it. It's very empowering, right? Because by focusing on a parent who's struggling, I don't want to be looking at the parent who's broken, right? I don't want to be disempowering. And, oh, look, now we found something we have to fix in you. So I really like how you're looking at it. If the parent is struggling with their own anxiety, they also have a key to the child because they do understand the child. Right. And they can tell you a lot that the child might not be able to verbalize. So that's a power. That's a superpower.
Right, right. We really believe that parents and most people actually know what they need to feel better. You kind of sometimes have to help them, sort of tease it out. They're the experts on their own recovery, their own process, and we really believe that. That's kind of how we approach our work with parents. Just, I guess, a couple of like tools, because again, we really want it like to give that support to parents and to kind of give them almost like practical tools. I think it's important. We talk a lot about self-care for parents. I get triggered by that word also. I think some of the stuff that is said is just almost like so ridiculous and unrealistic. But basically, I do think it's important for parents to know there's a difference between self-care and self-preservation, right? So self-preservation, getting childcare, getting help, getting enough sleep, eating properly, whatever it is, possibly getting cleaning help, whatever it is, that is not to me self-care. That's self-preservation. But self-care is about sort of filling your cup, like engaging in activities or things that sustain you, that replenish you, that sort of fill you so that you then have something to sort of to give over. And there's a difference between self-care and self-preservation. I want parents to give themselves permission, not just to self-preserve, but to really engage in things that are going to fill their sort of their cup so that they are now in a position to nurture more to their families, or just to give themselves for its own sake, for their own sake, So I think that's like one thing I think is like really just like important for parents to sort of know and have that permission and kind of like be able to kind of tell the difference, because I think a lot of parents engage more in self-preservation than actual self-care.
Right, and not to confuse like doing a session of yoga. That's not really what you're talking about here, or having some hot cocoa.
Right. Taking a bubble bath, that's wonderful. And that may really be very nurturing, but that may not necessarily be what you actually really need to care for your own emotional needs. And very often, actually, self-care is also about boundaries, right? It's about giving yourself permission to, pursue your own dreams or follow, sort of meet your own needs, or that acknowledge your needs and sort of expect that they be met, but all of that is really important for parents to be able to then have what to give, right, to their families. And then just in terms of other tools, I think Raizy touched a lot on almost like taking a space, taking a break. When a child is dysregulated, saying to be calm, or even telling the child in that moment to take a breath will not necessarily be effective. But if the parent themselves takes a breath, right, they're kind of modeling it for that child. And sometimes the best tool that we need for a moment of like really high like dysregulation is just distraction, almost. Like maybe you need to walk away, maybe you need to just give yourself some space, maybe you need to just get involved with something else that is not maladaptive, that actually is a coping tool. Distraction can very much be a coping tool, so I think that's also something parents need to sort of give themselves permission, to sort of do. And this just in terms of, we spoke about self-awareness. So I think that's very important. So that self-reflection and self-awareness, and whether it's having a peer group or maybe getting, a professional help if you need it to kind of help yourself in that process. I think that really, helps a lot. Curiosity, I think we spoke about. And again, just not being afraid to make, mistakes. Like there was a famous story about Thomas Edison, right? He did 1,000 experiments to create a battery, right? And he failed at all of that. And he was interviewed by a journalist who asked how it felt to fail 1,000 times. And he said, I succeeded 1,000 times. I succeeded in showing what doesn't work 1,000 times, right? So it's kind of like that idea of like, firstly, that we model that for our own kids as well, right? Like we don't really expect perfection, and sort of making mistakes is really just part of the process. And that also includes making parenting mistakes.
Right. I'm going to throw one thing in there in terms of self-compassion as a parent, is that if you're a support group, what you call your support group, your family, your friends, is making you feel worse, well, find a way to distance from that. I see that all the time.
Right. You have to create boundaries then about those type of relationships or people that are really not being supportive. And that's okay for you to do that,
Right. Do you want to talk for a few minutes about the program you mentioned to me before about the parent program?
Are you talking about space?
There's a program you mentioned before, anxiety parent.
Yeah, so well, actually, Raizy's certified in space. She can speak much more in detail, I guess, give like a general overview, but we're seeing an increase in anxiety for children, even very young children. And we're also seeing an increase in anxiety in parents and caregivers, which is not surprising because it is often, correlated. And so there's some of the more traditional approaches to treating anxiety usually is like CBT for kids, right? generally used for like, let's say 6 and up. But there's this very novel approach by Dr. Ellie Leibowitz from Yale, actually, called SPACE, which is supportive parenting for anxious childhood emotions. And you're basically treating the parents' accommodation of that child's anxiety. So you have like a child who's maybe afraid of thunderstorms or the rain. So when there's a very rainy day out where there's thunder, the parent, because they want to ease their child's discomfort, will allow that child to stay home, right? So they're inadvertently accommodating to the child's anxiety. So this treatment sort of treats that parental accommodation of the child's anxiety. It's very kind of revolutionary. And I think Raizy is you're certified in SPACE, right? I think she went through a kind of a rigorous process. So I'll let her give more details about it, but it's been a very innovative approach that we've actually trained a number of our therapists in at Ohel.
So I'm sorry, so I just make it clear, at Ohel, people can reach out to Ohel and get this particular therapy?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So Raizy, do you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just leans on some of the concepts we talk about, that you as a parent are the solution, and that we can impact our child's emotional health by making our own changes. And again, that idea that you need to learn the skills and you need to, right, to this sort of talk down to children, but to kind of recognize, no, I can be the source of healing. So the work is, I've done this work without ever meeting the child. I'll do like an assessment, but I do not work with the child at all. Work with the parent to help them sort of give over the messaging of that, like, you, the child, can experience discomfort. And again, these are children with anxiety disorders. So their level of discomfort is really, really high. And their level of refusal to engage in things is really high. And good parents are accommodating. You know why? Because it's hard to see your child be so distressed. Like, I just want to really make that clear. This is not judgment. Like, how could you not let your child experience distress? I mean, some of this distress is very, very impactful in family functioning. Like, I can understand why a parent is like, you know what, we're just going to avoid this. But the problem is it kind of feeds the monster. And that monster, which I mentioned a little bit before, is that you can't handle this. Therefore, I'll protect you from it. And the world is going to have bumps and moments that feel like I can't manage. And the more we set a child up for that's resilience, the more we set them up for the idea that they can manage, or these are the supports they can lean on to get through to the other side, the more they're ready to go out into the world and encounter discomfort. And again, some discomfort is typical and some discomfort is not. We cannot prevent, right, children from having uncomfortable and negative experiences throughout their lifespan, but we can prepare them to manage. And that's really where this conversation is, right? Helping them, recognizing how important we are. And that's really what SPACE really leans on.
That is fantastic. So I don't know if you want to talk for a few minutes about the program for older kids for resilience.
The resilience workbook, or in general, we do a lot of work, firstly, working with, let's say lower school kids and adolescents as well. I mean, kids really across the whole developmental life cycle. Obviously, we have, I guess I think of our work in terms of reactive and proactive, right? So we have the treatment piece, right? When we have kids that come in and parents that need, sort of treatment for whatever symptoms are going on, they're interfering with their functioning. And then we have kind of the proactive piece, which is the sort of prevention work that we do, building social emotional skills, building resilience. We do a lot of work in schools. Firstly, we actually have we piloted a program this last year called Resilient Schools. It's a very kind of comprehensive approach, similar in the way that it's a parallel process of like building resilience in teachers so that they can help build resilience like in their students. There's a lot of focus on like teacher sort of well-being. And our whole approach is in general in the school-based work, we use this kind of multi-tiered model. So instead of that traditional way of like, oh, the school-based counselor is coming in and working a few hours a week with the quote, I put in quotes, quote unquote, problem children, right? The kids that are like giving us trouble. We really focus on universal interventions, the idea that all children need to be exposed to social emotional learning. All kids need to have resilience building interventions. We're not interested in sort of like targeting those like few kids, and we're sort of labeling them. Now, it is important to have different tiers of interventions, right? So there's universal interventions, there's selective interventions, which is maybe 20% of kids that are really struggling. They really need extra support. Maybe we'll do school-based, counseling or social skills groups or whatever. And then those like sort of indicated the top tier, maybe 5 to 10% of kids that actually really need formal mental health treatment. So we either have some clinics actually co-located in the school setting, or we would have sort of a warm hands up to our clinics, because we have one in Brooklyn and Parkway. But it's the idea of like these 3 tiers of like interventions. So that's just our general model. But focusing on the universal interventions, which I think is most relevant, I guess, to this conversation, is we have created actually a lot of curricula to actually use in schools. And we really try very hard to create user-friendly tools, because teachers are so overwhelmed. We can talk for an hour about that. That's a whole other story. But teachers have been through so much through COVID, then they're finding themselves almost in the role of like deputized mental health professionals. It's not only about teaching history and math, they're dealing with all sorts of like issues in the classroom. It's really, really hard on teachers. So we want to be able to like not expect too much, but give them like user-friendly tools that they actually can use in the classroom in an easy way, that are kind of replicable and scalable and things like that. So we've actually created a bunch of tools. So we have a middle school anxiety prevention program called MAP, which is 9 lessons that we actually give to 6th graders that we see a lot of anxiety develop usually around that time period. There's a lot of changes, transitions, puberty, bar and bat mitzvah, change from, homeroom to departmental, a lot of academic pressure, peer pressure, things like that. So it's a kind of this whole program that kind of helps kids understand the different transition and gives them a lot of tools. We teach them about emotions in the brain, conflict resolution. There's a lot of different modules that are actually teaching like very practical skills to kids. So that's the MAP program. And then for lower school, we have a resilience workbook. So I had mentioned that actually kind of started this whole conversation. We had the COVID-19 resilience workbook that we did with kids during COVID. So we actually created a non-COVID version.
Cool.
That we're going to roll out in the fall. We're actually really excited about it. It has an outer space theme. We really tried to make it very engaging, and it's very much based on like the latest research, like everything that we talk about. Like we're very into the idea of like adding value, not doing something what's been done before, and really sort of tapping into the sort of the latest understanding and research. So a huge section of the workbook is about interoception. It's about teaching kids about emotion for their age level, right? Because the preschool book was written more for little ones, and this is a little bit more sophisticated understanding, but that's appropriate for that age group, about what emotions feel like inside their body. We're very, very careful again to like, sort of frame it like this is what, angry can feel like in a body. What does your body feel like when it's angry, right? Because it's different for everyone, and there's a lot of place to write and to draw. That's a big part of the book is like, emotions, and we cover a lot of like some of the 7 basic emotions, happy, sad, angry, worry, frustration, etc. And of course, calm, very important. Calm is the baseline. And then we also have a whole section of the book is really about coping tools. So it's very much about teaching kids like sort of different types of coping tools. It's kind of loosely based on this model called Basic PH. Islands of Resilience was pioneered by Dr. Muli Lahad. And it kind of is based on the idea that we all have like, there's different coping streams, and that we all sort of have them, and we tend to favor like a couple of coping streams over the others, right? So it's, Basic PH stands for, PH is physical, movements, and then it's belief systems, cognition, affect, talking, right? And sort of needing that sort of emotional support, social connections, imagination, kind of creativity, and things like that. So we kind of like tapped into those concepts, and we created almost like this space toolkit, like in the resilience-based workbook of like these different coping tools that kids can sort of draw upon. So I can connect, I can create, I can move, I can say to myself a lot of like self-compassion, I can use my senses, which is actually based on like DBT skills type of ideas of like regulating through using your senses. And it's kind of like this power toolkit, and kids can kind of see, oh, what are the tools that I like to use? So to teach them from a very young age of like, I have tools, I have things that I like to do. What are the things that I like to do? So they can almost like pull them out a little bit more, like have them at the ready when they need it, sort of creating that awareness in them. So that's actually a big part of the workbook, that section about the sort of the power toolkit. And there's a lot of other things in there, like service to others. We know that's a very important part of resilience, and building resilience is giving children opportunities to contribute to the well-being of others, right? So we have a whole section about how do you give to others and things like that, and who are the people that it's very important for kids obviously to have that safe person, right? And in terms of those like healthy connections, people they can trust. So like, who are the people that you can talk to at school, at home, and other places, sort of like helping them identify that safe person for them, and a lot of other different sort of sections in the workbook. But those are kind of the main features is sort of the coping toolkit, and then the interoception piece. So we're really proud of it, and it'll be rolling out in the fall, and you'll hopefully be hearing more about it at that time.
Are parents involved with this program?
I'm sorry?
Are parents involved with this program? It sounds like it's a school-based program, correct?
Right. So it's a workbook. So like the last workbook was actually used by many parents with their kids, but we, use it on a very large scale, like in schools. Like that was kind of the platform that we used to kind of roll it out. It is something that can be used with parents. I do think it's unrealistic for parents to kind of be sitting down with this workbook with kids. The way that we believe is a best practice is not to like sit down and do it all at once. We kind of, part of our training is doing a couple pages at a time, having supplementary activities, right? So that you kind of like, reinforce some of the concepts in the book and have different kinds of activities that kind of build on some of the ideas in the book. Maybe we have a piece on gratitude, so then the teacher can start a gratitude journal and, do other kinds of things that again, reinforce the concept. So not to like do everything at once, because you really want it to have time to kind of sit and, for kids to like experience the world, kind of integrating some of these different sort of concepts. It's very much, I guess you could say, like a starting off point, but not an end point. It's kind of like,
Right. What I meant was, when my kids were in school, we would often get letters saying, at school, your child is working on X. I didn't mean to give it all to the parents to do. I meant to connect it so that the parents can reinforce it at home.
Yes. Oh, yes, very much so. So as part of sort of this package that we're pulling together, so there's going to be teacher training, and there also will be like parent workshops. Exactly. So that, because that's really the main way that the kids are going to learn is by the caregivers around them, the parents, the teachers, modeling the concept, using the words, using the language. And really, that's how it's going to really resonate the most. So that's definitely going to be part of the process. And I saw from the COVID-19 book, the outcomes that I think were really the best that we were able to really see were exactly where those kind of things happened, where the teachers, did it in bite-sized pieces. They modeled, there was parent carryover, and they kind of like own the process themselves, and I think that we really saw like huge differences. Like I literally had teachers tell me like I had half my students were like bouncing off the walls, and then like we started using the workbook, and then the teacher like kind of reinforced and gave reinforcements when they would like should have used the skill from the workbook, and she literally saw a difference in her whole class. So like I think we saw the best outcomes when the kind of the teacher or the parent, whoever, kind of made themselves part of the process, just like hand a child a workbook. So that's kind of what we're going to try to build into the training, and we're going to have a teacher guide and all of that when it comes out in the fall.
Okay, so this is a teaser. I want to come back with you guys and focus on that in greater depth, because we're just really scratching the surface.
Yeah.
This is an older age group. I get parents all the time, teach them skills, not to be angry. And again, I work with 0 to 5. The idea of self-regulating and knowing that your stream that works is not appropriate in preschool age. Primarily, regulation is going to be through an attachment figure. And when the foundation is set up that I can co-regulate, then I'm available to self-regulate and tap into my own streams. But when a child doesn't have experiences, and I know we're talking resilience and we're not necessarily, but there are children who are not going to have experiences of positive attachment and the way that they feel seen and they feel their experiences can be managed. They are not going to be really good at self-regulating. And the idea of talking to a child, even at 7, 8, and be like, use your skills. Here's the skills. If we don't step back and say, wait, have they been seen? Or if we're aware that the child has interpersonal trauma, we're doing them a really big disservice. I just like, because I all the time get, which skills should they learn? And I'm working obviously with the 5 to 10% where there is diagnosis of a mental health issue, or there's a trauma history. And I think, just recognizing that all this needs to be done in the context of relationships.
Right. But I'm going to mention repair again. Right? That nobody should listen to this and say, okay, well, I missed that zone.
No, never, never.
And you don't have to
come around again. Sorry.
I also really want to highlight, and we don't have so much time, but just to, you don't need to be it. There are actually previously, before we were very industrialized, people lived in small villages and everybody helped with the caregiving. Often people lived in homes with grandparents, and what was the protective nature of that? The protective nature was that if mommy wasn't available, maybe she was early in pregnancy and really wasn't feeling well, or maybe she didn't have the capacity for whatever reason, grandma picked up. Sometimes just that day. And so when we live a little bit more isolated, but we do have other people who can step in. So even if there are reasons that attachment is complicated or problematic, it doesn't need to just be you. There can be, and we encourage people to have other healthy adult figures interacting with your child. And if you have healthy attachment, those other healthy adult figures just reinforce these concepts. But if for some reason there is significant misattunement, not the occasional, other people like teachers can scaffold and help.
Right. And in the middle ground, where maybe there's not significant misattunement or attachment issues, but where you're struggling with it, you can get help to be better with that. That's what I meant by repair. Right. So
depressed, parents it's very significant. I'm sure you see in pediatric work
Right.
with little children. So take care of yourself. You're taking care of your kid.
Right, or just a lot of stresses in your life. You may not be able to do this right now. Don't think that, it's too late. It's never too late. Right. So I want to really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's never too late. And we're actually bringing a new model into Ohel attachment-based family therapy, which is, again, meant for teens. And it's exactly this, to kind of like work on sort of repairing, attachment issues between parents and children is absolutely never too late. And a big part of it is that like self-awareness always says your best friend, almost acknowledging ways you may not have been able to be there for your child, not because you were a bad parent. Maybe you were overwhelmed. Maybe you had your own stuff. Maybe the needs were just so great, whatever the reasons are, and sort of, and working towards repair. It's never too late to do that.
This was fantastic. I learned a lot, and I'm going to ask you if we can do this again, because all the stuff we talked about at the end really needs at least one more episode. So I hope you will.
Sure. No, thank you for having us. We love talking about this, like our favorite topic. We could talk about it for hours.
But it's really foundational, and it's really important. You're doing amazing work, and I'm looking forward to part 2. That's what I have to say.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for doing this with me, and good Shabbos.
Take care. Have a good Shabbos.
Right.
Thanks for listening to the JOMA Preventative Health Podcast. If you've enjoyed this, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and share this with your friends. For more information, check out our Instagram at JOMA_org. Check out our website, www.joma.org, that's JOWMA.org, or email us at health@joma.org.